In this episode, I sit down with Boyd Douglas-Davies. Boyd has a vast wealth of knowledge in the horticulture industry. Boyd is the current board member and former HTA president. He is the chairman of the Ornamental Horticulture Roundtable Group. He is also an ambassador of the YPHA, which is the Young People in Horticulture Association. He is a trustee of the Green Fingers charity, which does amazing work for children in hospices. I'll leave the link in the description. He was the CEO at Hillview Garden Centres and the Chief Executive Officer at Webb's Garden Centres. He was the Director for Plants and PR Communications at British Garden Centres and the founder of Garden Relief Day. He's currently at the Boyd Partnership as a managing consultant. I cannot thank Boyd enough for giving up his time and coming and having a sit down and chat with me about the industry. It was an absolute honour of mine to do this podcast as well. I've heard so many different stories about Boyd and none of them bad. I hope you enjoy the first episode of the Plant Pod. Let's get into it. Hello Boyd, thank you for joining us today.
Nice pleasure, nice to be here.
Thank you. It's an honour of mine. I've heard so much about you as well. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, you've talked to the right people.
I
only heard the good stuff.
I have.
Oh, that's okay then.
How did you get started in horticulture?
Oh, that's a long time ago, but my granddad was a seedsman,
Yes.
so he was selling seeds up in Preston and Lancashire, and then my dad ran garden centres, had his own garden centres down here, so I grew up surrounded by horticulture. You know, I started at weekends as a wee nipper, down at my dad's garden centre in Stratford-on-Avon, bagging up dog food and seed potatoes and loose seeds, you know, peas and beans, and bagging them up in his warehouse. I think I was about 7 years old, and that was my life. So always been in horticulture, loved it all the way through.
So there isn't really a reason why, because you was already there and doing it.
Well,
so the
I suppose
reason why would
I was born into it, but I loved it, which
Yeah.
is why I then chose it. Because I could easily have, I was never pressurised into you must work in the business, you must come into this industry, you must work with your dad.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think almost parents were keen to say, well, go and do what you want to do. Don't feel you need to come into this. But I just loved it, and it's the variety, isn't it? Every day, every year, it's different. I can't honestly say I've never had 2 years the same whatsoever. So it's great fun, isn't it? And what a wonderful place to be, isn't it?
Definitely. Is that why you fell in love with it as well? Because there was so many aspects of it.
I think it is, yeah, the variety. You can be in horticulture, and that's a very short sentence, but actually when you explode that out into, well, what do you do? Oh, there's so many things, isn't there? And I've done loads of great jobs, all of them I've enjoyed all the way through my life, but they're so different. And I think back to many years ago when I went to Pershore College, and what we learnt in the 80s, mid-late 80s, well, the garden centres nowadays are so different to what we were learning then that you couldn't possibly predict what was going to come. And you know, I remember in the days when I started, welly boots were green or black.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, they're every colour but green or black, aren't they? And things, and soft play centres and restaurants, and the diversity of what's going on, and the range of plants that we sell, and the opportunities that we now have as an industry, and the engagement levels of people's enthusiasm for horticulture and being in the garden or an open space or on a balcony with a little window box. It's just so brilliant, isn't it? What's going on?
You can take it anywhere as well.
Yeah.
There's so much variety, and when you think of horticulture, a lot of people think, oh, just people that work in garden centres, or you know, oh, they just grow plants. But there's so many different job roles, and there's so many different varieties of what you can actually do with it. And getting people into the industry, because I know from my research people have struggled, like companies have struggled to get more people in, younger people. I know the industry wants a lot more younger people, they don't want the industry dying out. So how important do you think it is to get young people into the industry?
I think it's massive. It's a massive issue. It's a massive opportunity, because I think what's happened as well is that there's a lot of people out there who've run their own family business for many, many years, and their kids don't necessarily want to follow in the business. They've travelled the world, they've got other opportunities, But then there's so many people who now want to make a difference to the world.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the biggest single influences you can have on the world is through horticulture.
Yeah.
It's really hard to make a difference at a personal level in most industries. But actually, you can be a young person who's planting up a new environmental landscape. You can be a person who's designing new gardens. You can be a person who's creating new plants through propagation. So you can actually really change the world as a young person, a person of any age. You can change it. But I think the opportunity to make a difference is what is now attracting younger people into our wonderful world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, definitely. And the apprenticeships now that are available as well. I mean, when I came in to the nursery because I was doing a web shop which was online orders and sales, and then I went to the nursery and was offered the apprenticeship. I didn't even know there was apprenticeships in the industry. That's how blind I was to it. So when I started it, I fell in love with it. But it's not pushed, I don't think.
No.
Like, when you're at school, who do you have come round and say, you thought about getting into horticulture?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I think we do fail at the moment as an industry to share that information. I went back to my old school in Stratford recently, and I talked to the careers director and the development director of the school and had a meeting with them. And I said, when I was 14, I came in here as a kid in the school and said I want to go to Pershore College. And all those years ago, they didn't have any information at the school about the college. I knew more about the college and the course than the school careers team did.
Yeah.
And you go on now, in effect 40 years later, and ask the same question, and there is still an industry gap between the industry talking to educational establishments, making sure that as a 14-year-old today, you can get to hear about it. And that is a gap. The industry are working hard on that. There has been a lot of work recently, not only through the YPHA, who formed back in 2020, the Young People in Horticulture Association. They're out there making a lot of inroads into awareness of the industry, but also the Horticultural Trade Association has been working hard on it. The Ornamental Horticulture Roundtable Group is working hard. I have the privilege of chairing that group at the moment, and the objective we have there is to face towards government, really, and all the different departments: Department of Education, the Department of Work and Pensions, the Department for the Environment, Tourism, all these different areas, and really highlight how important horticulture is and how it is a great careers choice. So we have an Education and Employment Committee who are working hard to make sure that schools, colleges, education establishments of all levels are appreciating the diverse range of horticultural careers, because like you say, the industry has probably been slow to tell the world actually about what we have available to them as career choices. And other big industries that are maybe highly financed and a bit more glamorous maybe in some cases, of course they do a great job of telling people when you're at school, come and do this, come and do that, and we've maybe been a bit quiet, just getting on and doing the job and forgetting that actually we need to sort of fuel that pipeline, make sure the youngsters do realise that there is great careers available in horticulture. There's all sorts of things. And people go, oh well, you don't get paid very well. Well, I think every industry is the same, isn't it? Every industry you get different levels of income, and horticulture is no different. There are great opportunities to earn great money in horticulture.
Definitely.
And it's about getting stuck in, having a great attitude and going, right, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to make a difference. And there's plenty of companies out there who are looking right now for really good, up and coming, enthusiastic team members. So I would encourage anybody to come into it, and you never get bored.
No, never.
Never.
Because it's
No
so
chance.
diverse.
Yeah.
And about the money side of it, I know that people say there isn't a lot of money in it, but I think if you put the time in, and you put the effort in to learn everything that you can learn about your chosen sector, there is good money in the industry.
Yeah,
You've just got to put the time in and the effort in to do
I think
it.
it's the same with any job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really. Why should somebody just be given something for doing nothing or for just doing the average? And I think horticulture is just the same. If you want to get on and throw yourself into it with great enthusiasm, there are people out there who will reward that. And there's great opportunities. It's not a difficult industry to actually start even your own business in. It's not like somewhere you've got to go and build a huge factory and have millions of pounds to get started. People can start in landscaping, they can start in garden design, you can even start growing plants on a small nursery and getting excited about a particular small group or something. So there's lots of self-employed opportunities, but also there's a lot of companies out there now looking for great people. So
Definitely.
it's definitely want a career to, and it's a career for life because it's never going away, is it?
No, it's not.
You know, if you studied 20 years ago how to build petrol engine cars, I think you've probably got about 10 years left to build petrol engine cars. That career's coming to an end. You've got to retrain, you've got to diversify, you've got to do something different. Horticulture just evolves, just keeps on going.
Well, it's never going to end, like you say, because food,
Yeah,
plants, everyone loves
Yeah.
plants,
Yeah.
everyone loves flowers, trees, and
Yeah.
food.
yeah.
Those are the main
We all eat.
part
We all
of
eat
it.
every day. And when you take the actual, what do flowers do? Flowers give bees the pollen. What do bees do? Well, bees actually generate almost all the food in the world. Has to have a bee interaction somewhere to pollinate to create the food crop.
Yeah.
So actually, flowers are the start of the food chain. Without flowers, we wouldn't be getting anything. So it's a really, really fundamental piece of our world, and going forward, even more so. When you look at the government ambitions, and it's not a party political thing, it's a government, for the next 25 years, there's a government plan how to improve the environment, how to change the world we live in. Over half of those policies and strategies are only delivered through horticulture.
Yeah.
So over half of the solution is horticultural based. And it's huge, isn't it? No other industry can claim that.
No.
And that's not a claim, it's a fact.
Yeah, and it's just a never-ending industry.
Yeah,
The story will go on and on
yeah,
for
absolutely.
generations to come.
yeah. And there are so many younger people now in the industry in terms of as consumers. What we saw with COVID was a big change, wasn't it? That
It was.
actually, I think pre-COVID, and I'm going to sound a bit old and crusty now, you know, you'd always think about people have life stages and people come to different parts of their life and it changes what they do. So when people start owning their own property, they're possibly more garden orientated because they now own the space around them. When people have had their kids who've grown up and stopped kicking footballs into every new plant that's just been planted, they become more garden orientated. That's the historical view. Now, with COVID, when everybody suddenly realised how valuable a plant was, even in the smallest of flats and apartments on the 5th floor of a building, or how important a little window box was, or a balcony, or just a little bit of garden space, and how about having that plants and flowers, and whether it be some bedding plants in a hanging basket outside your front door, or an allotment full of veggies you could eat. Everybody realised, irrespective of age, actually how valuable plants are. So there is no absolute, you get to 35 and you become a gardening person. You don't suddenly wake up one morning and decide to get into gardening. All ages love gardens and plants, and young people are so enthusiastic. It's brilliant, the actual engagement now with people, and people at different life stages, different ages, are discovering gardening and actually just the garden space and how easy it is ultimately, isn't it? We know we're in it. We know that growing plants is not difficult. And actually, if sometimes it doesn't work, we'll just get another plant. I always think when I'm at home and think, well, I didn't like that bottle of red wine, but it doesn't stop me drinking red, does it? It just stops me buying that one again. And if a plant doesn't like you and it doesn't grow in your garden, it doesn't stop you buying another plant and growing some more seeds. You just change what you're doing. Because not every garden is perfect for everything. So I think that's what people have realised over the lockdown period, was that actually they don't need green fingers. They just need a bit of time. And that's what they've realised, and they kept on to that. 3 million people in lockdown 1 planted something for the first, it was 2.97 million people to be precise, planted something for the first time in their lives. 3 million people rounded. 3.2 million people planted something to eat for the first time in their lives. Amazing. I mean, it must be the biggest single hobby in Britain.
Yeah, definitely.
It's massive, isn't it?
Definitely.
What a wonderful world.
And with COVID as well, it changed the perspective of the industry.
Yeah.
Because like you say, 3 million people planted something for the first time, and they've carried it on.
Yeah.
And because they've started it, they did spend money in the pandemic online, buying everything that they needed, but then when they realise that they like it, it goes on for years to come.
Yeah.
So although that initial money went in during the pandemic, it also carries on now why they do it.
I think it's like any hobby, isn't it? That you look at it from the outside and it looks difficult.
Yeah.
But once you get into it, you realise how relaxing it is, how therapeutic it is, how much fun it is, and suddenly you realise that actually gardening isn't difficult, and actually just spending some time be it cutting the grass,
Yeah.
sowing some seeds, pruning a clematis, planting something new. Actually, physically, it's fantastic for you because actually it's great exercise, but mentally, the difference that flowers and plants make. And I'm just looking at the primroses in the garden. I've been away on the road a couple of days this week. I've come home and there's all these little primroses have popped up in the lawn, and then you have to smile. You have to smile. You can't do anything but smile because you look at them and think, isn't that amazing? A couple of weeks ago, no sign of those little flowers, and now there they are, all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, is that whole wealth of what horticulture can do for you, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what space you've got, whether you've got an acre, allotment, a balcony, or just a window box, you can actually capture that fantastic spirit of gardening in the smallest of spaces. Which again, you can't go fly fishing in your back garden, can you?
No, you
You know,
can't.
a lot of hobbies, they require space. I don't know that you can play a proper football game without a big bit of grass
Yeah.
and things. So yeah, we've got this advantage that everybody and anybody can get involved with it.
And you don't have to have, if you wanted to grow food on a balcony, your balcony is not too high and you wanted to grow tomatoes, for instance.
Yeah.
You don't have to grow a tomato plant that grows up. You can do the climbing.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
Put it in a hanging basket.
Yeah.
Have the tumbler, you know, tomato tumbler, have a hanging basket outside your front door.
Yeah.
What a fantastic way to come home every day and pop a couple of tomatoes off the plant and eat them.
And strawberries.
Yeah,
the same.
strawberries, absolutely. Get a tall pot and
Yeah.
have strawberries. Potatoes, do potatoes in a bag. You know, it's so accessible, isn't it?
And
to
it's
get gardening.
nice because you've grown that.
Yeah,
So when you're eating it,
yeah,
that's what you have put your
Yeah.
time and effort in,
yeah.
and now you're reaping
Yeah,
those
it tastes better,
rewards.
doesn't it?
It does.
You've grown it, it tastes
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
100%.
And there's no food miles
No.
because it's like food feet, isn't it? How far away was it from your kitchen?
Yeah.
Well, it was about 10 feet away from your kitchen, you know, and if you eat it where you pick it, yeah, absolutely. So you've got all those advantages. You've got no packaging to worry about, and that's a big problem, isn't it? That
It is.
packaging in food, and there's lots of things going on in that industry, but you know, you grow it and take it into the kitchen and eat it. It's phenomenal. I think there's going to be I'm going to stick my neck out. I think there's a bit of a trend coming.
Okay.
I think edible houseplants.
Really?
And I'm not just talking about herbs on the windowsill. I think things like shiitake mushrooms and things like that, where people start growing the mushroom logs inside, so you can start growing a decorative ornamental piece of something, but then you can eat it.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, you see already citrus and things, but I think herbs, you're going to see more and more herb growing inside the house because people want all that fresh herb. But things like mushrooms, which is quite a little secret superfood, I think that's coming too.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll be on the lookout.
yeah, I think well, it brings both together, doesn't it? It brings food and indoors and house plants, and I mean, look at house plants since lockdown.
Yeah.
Many years ago, there was a time when you thought house plants were a dead department. You know, they weren't selling at all really, but oh my goodness me, people are
Buying them.
loving them.
Yeah. It's just the easiness. Like again, if you haven't got a garden,
Yeah.
you can put houseplants anywhere.
And they're good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, they're good for you. You know, you put good foliage house plants in your bedroom, they stop you snoring.
Do they have?
Absolutely do. Yeah. Because they improve the quality of the air. So
Okay.
actually what they're doing is they're cleaning the air, and actually there are a load of houseplants which are great for the bedroom. So if you've got a snoring partner, I'm not saying it's going to cure it, but it's going to improve it.
Well, my partner will be listening to this
Yeah.
and saying, "Let's get some."
Yeah. 20 houseplants, please.
Yeah.
So
On my side.
Yeah, and they purify the air, don't they? They improve the air quality, they improve the room, the space, the environment.
And they just look nice as
And
well.
they look lovely. They look lovely, yeah. And they're not difficult
No.
to keep. Actually, they're not. I mean, orchids are so easy. Phalaenopsis orchid. People think orchids are quite hard. They are the easiest plant to keep in the house. You know, they almost thrive on neglect. They don't really want to be drowned. We have them in the house. We have them flowering, and then as soon as they finish flowering, we just put them on the kitchen windowsill where it's steam from the sink and from the kettle and just the kitchen activity and that moisture in the air. They take that all in through their aerial roots, so you can ignore them. And then suddenly, a few weeks later, oh, there's another flower spike on the way.
Yeah.
Like, brilliant value.
How do you think that Brexit affected the industry?
Wow. Well, it sort of snuck up on us, didn't it? Because
Yeah.
COVID was the big story at the time. It's shifted things a lot. It has made a big impact. And at simple level, the paperwork and the administration now to bring a plant from Europe into the UK is considerable, as opposed to previous to that, there really wasn't any paperwork hardly. So that's one aspect of it that's changed things. And not saying that's a bad thing, because biosecurity is really, really top of everybody's agenda, isn't it? We want to make sure that Britain is never affected by some of the horrific plant diseases and problems that occur around the world. So having good, robust systems that make sure that plants are checked and quality controlled and health checked, and then when they do arrive in Britain, the plant passporting system ensures we know where they are, where they've gone to. If there's a problem, they can be traced back. So that's all good news. I think early days Brexit, the paperwork was horrific. I know from our experience we were spending a fortune every week in literally costs of paperwork. Thankfully, government has listened a lot to the industry and has improved and simplified the paperwork. It's still as effective, it's still as robust, but it doesn't take so much time. You can actually do paperwork in a much more logical way now, which is brilliant, so that's made life easier. I think what it's done is it's allowed us to look at the British production, and of course COVID again masked down because demand was so high. There was no way that Britain had enough plants in production to cope with COVID, so thankfully we still had access to plants abroad. Sadly, the guys in Ireland have struggled a lot with Brexit because of the cross-border issues in Ireland, where yes, they are an island, but they had two countries in the same space and an open border, and that caused lots of problems. So I know lots of British growers, UK-based growers, struggle to get plants into Ireland, but the new agreement, which is all very fresh, the Windsor document, is going to hopefully make that a lot more accessible. So I know our friends across in Ireland struggled, and crazy situation. It was easier and quicker for them to get plants from Belgium and Holland than it was from England. That just seemed very illogical at the time, but that's now I think been resolved. So I think that gave us some issues. The other side of Brexit that gave us massive issues, of course, and again, was it Brexit, was it COVID? Ultimately it was probably both, was the labour, the access to labour, because horticulture is at times of the year intensive, isn't it? There's a lot of work to be done. You look at the edible cropping that people need, go across the border here to Herefordshire and look at the amount of soft fruit pickers that were needed, and sad to see plants not being picked, but people forget that actually nurseries that are producing plants for garden centres also relied heavily on a large workforce, and many of those workers came from countries in Europe, and that became difficult at the same time as many people went home because of COVID, and then it was difficult to get back, or impossible to get back in some cases. So I think the other impact at the time was huge on the labour, and that made it very difficult for British growers to do that. And then in the retail side, the third aspect of labour was, of course, catering was very difficult to get enough people in the UK to work in restaurants and garden centres and retail. And we, of course, were very much used to working with colleagues from all over Europe, and a shortage of people impacted heavily on that, and that's made it difficult. Still don't think we're quite sorted on the right number of people to do the jobs, and luckily the permit scheme has been increased. A year ago, government released an extra 10,000 permits last spring, and the number for this year is more. There's still work to be done on that, really, because the permit scheme allows people to come and do a 6-month block, but it doesn't allow them to split that 6 months. Okay. So ideally, our horticultural industry, often you'd want somebody for 3 months in the spring and 3 months in the autumn, but you can't do that at the moment. It's a continuous 6-month period, not 6 months within 12, so there's some work there. Or they extend these visas to allow them to cover 9 months maybe, and that would allow somebody to start in the spring and finish the autumn season off. So there's some work there to be done, but I do know that the officials in government are listening and looking at that, and are really appreciative of the need for horticulture to be staffed up properly. So we've had some bumpy times with Brexit, but I think we are starting to see it settle down.
Do you think it helped British growers, flower growers, British nurseries? I know we were saying that you could get stuff from Holland quicker than you could from our own country. But do you think it helped when Brexit happened in a way to bring more money into the British growing?
I think it certainly made people think hard about what they need to do to support their supply chain long term. And I'm pleased to see lots of people now as retailers talking to growers about multi-year contracts. And I think we've probably been weak in the past. We've probably said, well, we'll buy these off you this spring. We don't know what we're going to do next spring. So where does a grower go with that? How do they invest in their business if they've got uncertainty about long-term customer base, whereas I do see garden centres, and we do it in our business. We now talk to growers about multi-year relationships. We're trying to work with them on the long term to give them security, to know that they can keep producing plants, they can invest in their nurseries, they can invest in the training of their teams. And I think that's a big part of the Brexit piece. It was so muddled, wasn't it? When Brexit and COVID all hit at the same time, we'll never ever, I think, pull apart the two things and be able to work out which bits impacted on which more.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think the industry is looking now more to UK. And I think there's a big piece there as well for the government to play a part in ensuring that actually nurseries are given planning permission, because you get this overall national intention that we want to support horticulture. Yeah, that's the government's big statement. We want to see British horticulture flourish. But then you get down to a local level authority, and the local authorities have the rights and the control over planning permission. So I know growers who've spent years trying to get permission to improve their facilities, but they can't get past that local authority who've got their own reasons, right or wrong, but they have a local decision that impacts on that national infrastructure. And we need to get a bit more connected really at a national level with some maybe instruction to the local authority to say this is a critical industry. And when you look how much money British horticulture generates, how many people it employs, we're getting towards 750,000 people. If you take the projections that we've got at the moment, we're going to go from just shy of 600,000 to 750,000 people employed directly in horticulture. That's a vast industry. Billions of amounts in terms of money going into the taxation that's we generate. So billions and billions. 10 times more money comes out of horticulture than does out of UK fisheries. So as an industry, we are huge.
Yeah.
And back to that point earlier, that half of the environmental strategy for the next 25 years, over half of that strategy is delivered through a horticultural activity. We are at the heart of everything this country needs to do. So we just need to get all on the same page, don't we? I think we're all in the same book. We're not just on the same page.
We're not
on the same
working
page
together.
yet. No.
And that's what
But we're getting better.
Yeah.
Getting better. I'm really encouraged by the conversations I have with government nowadays about how they see horticulture.
Yeah.
Except for the peat announcement this week.
Well, I was just going to get on to the peat-free debate.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I agree with it. I really do.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of peat. Let's do other growing medias. But I do know a lot of people who say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Why should we stop
Right.
peat? We've been using it for years.
Yeah.
And you try and explain the situation to them of how long it takes
Yeah.
to form
Yeah.
for a metre squared.
Yeah.
And it can take 1,000 years.
Yeah. I think you can't go back, can you? You can't look back and say, well, we've always done it.
Yeah.
Why can't we carry on doing it? I mean, they used to shoot people, didn't they?
Exactly.
But we don't do that anymore. So you can't do that. You can't use that as an argument. And I think we have to look at the long term and the environmental impact of what we're trying to create in terms of a better Britain, really.
Yeah.
So undoubtedly, nobody argues that peat bogs are special places in the world and that they create a special habitat and environment. So there's massive value to them. I think what we've got the challenge is that Rome wasn't built in a day. And what we've got to be really careful of, and this is the disappointment of this week's announcement, which is fundamentally saying that plants grown in peat cannot be sold from the end of 2026. Well, where I'm sat here today, that is not very far away. And when you think about lots of questions that come out of that, for starters. So what about the plants that are already growing in peat? Things like young trees that are not destined to be sold until after 2026. What happens to those? There must be some conversation there. So that's a short-term discussion. But the most important thing is that we've got to be able to keep focus on plants are special. And if any decision is taken that reduces the amount of plants available to the public, even in the short term, and short term 2 or 3 years, that's a wrong decision. And what we've got to make sure is that government fund and support the peat-free production. Peat-free growing is different. It's not difficult, it's just different. That's my view on it. It is a different way of growing stuff, and you need to feed more often, probably. You need to water more often, probably.
Yeah.
But that's not that absolute. Different things have different ways of reacting. It's just different. So let's not be afraid of peat-free growing. Let's not get worried about that it can't be done. Yes, it can be done. I've seen lots of great nurseries growing great plants in peat-free compost. The biggest worry I've got is the availability of all that peat-free compost. And if it means we can't get compost to grow those wonderful plants, therefore we have less plants available in the consumer marketplace, we've shot ourselves in the foot there. Yeah. As a country, the government need to be aware that there is an absolute limit to the resource. And some of the peat-free journeys we've been on over the last 20 years have been dead ends. The green waste piece of work is really difficult to deliver on because you can't guarantee what goes into green waste is consistent. Of course, it isn't consistent. That's the one thing you can guarantee. It certainly is not consistent. So actually saying, well, there's lots of green waste. Well, green waste is not the absolute solution. We can just bring coir. Well, coir, it's involving environmental impacts, bringing coir halfway around the world. Is that the right solution? It's a great product. Coir replicates the properties of peat really well, so I can see why people like it. But wood fibre, British grown trees, grown on farms for the purpose of turning them into wood fibre, that's a great solution. But there is a limit to how many trees we can produce. There's a limit to how much wood fibre and therefore a limit to how much compost. And if you shift the whole of horticulture too quickly into a peat-free world, there just won't be enough growing media. I really don't believe there's going to be enough growing media. And our friends across Europe are starting, they are behind the UK, starting to wake up to peat-free, but they're not going to be there for 2026. Yeah. So if, in effect, the rule is you cannot sell a plant grown in peat from the 1st of January 27, I think that's going to close the borders to plants coming from Europe.
Yeah.
Well, as a business, we sell last year 8.4 million plants we sold. 51% of them were from British growers, which is a big number. We've moved to a lot more British growers. But 49%, so nearly 4 million plants came from across the water. If I can't get those 4 million plants, and we're talking 3 years on, my projection is we'll be looking for over 10 million plants to sell by then. So 500,000 of those plants would be a massive issue. But we're talking about 5 million plants possibly that we can't get. If I couldn't get 500,000, that's a problem. If I can't get 5 million plants, how does that leave the gardeners of Britain?
Yeah.
They can't get the plants they want. And ultimately, what then does it do to pricing? There's a real risk here that compost becomes very expensive. If it becomes expensive, it impacts on plants. If the cost of plants goes up too much, that makes it more difficult for people to engage with it at the simplest of, I just want to go and buy some plants, but I can't afford to. There's unintended consequences of this peat ban that unless we're really careful and get the timing right and the support right that the government give to ensure that we've got access to the product, we've got full understanding of it, because we all know, I know, that you can't decide in a month how a plant is going to perform over the next 5 years.
No.
And from seed to finished plant, that plant goes through different composts. If we think about the good old John Innes, seed, number 1, 2 and 3, different composts for different reasons. Plants evolve, no different than a baby. A baby does not start life on steak and chips. It needs a different meal at an early stage to what it's going to eat when it's 20. And the same with plants. So it's not something which we can quickly in one season decide, that's it, we've sorted it. Problem done, let's move on. It's going to take years, and it has taken years to get to where we already are. On our retail side, 70% of the compost we sell now is peat-free, but we're still at 30%. We will by next year be at the 100% for next spring. Yeah. But it's taken a long time to get enough quality compost for us to be able to say, that's a good product. And that's the same with plant growing. Plants are so different, they're like humans, aren't they?
They are.
They all have different diets, and it's taken a long time to work out what the right diet is.
Where I am, we are growing in peat-free.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I know you touched on needing feeding more, and they do, because it does dry out a lot quicker. Yeah. And if you don't watch it, the plants can die. But there are wetting agents as well that people can use. But then I think when people are looking at that, it's more money that you have to spend. Yeah. And with the coir, it does replicate the peat, but from what I've researched with my apprenticeship, that to bring coir over, it's a lot of money in washing it to get the salt out of it. And
it's very salty, isn't it? As a natural product, it's hugely salty. And of course, there's only one thing you can wash it with, fresh water. Yeah. Which actually is a challenge, because we all know that water's a scarce commodity as well in the world. Yeah. And where it's coming from, Sri Lanka and India, water's really scarce. So to be washing it with fresh drinking water, when actually there are people around that part of the world who are desperate for drinking water, there are other consequences, aren't there, of this?
There are.
It's about a complete solution. It's not about a single part of the solution, and that's what worries me. Is that unfortunately you sometimes get people who get put in a job to do a job, and that job is quite singular and quite isolated, and that job doesn't require them to think about the consequences of what they are doing. So they achieve their goal. Let's ban peat. Full stop. Well, what about everything else that happens after peat? Well, that's not my problem. My problem's banning peat. And that's a bit dangerous. I do think we need to be connected up and thinking about this properly. We can all see the direction we're going in. We can see the benefits of that, but it's the cost of what happens as part of that fallout, isn't it?
Do you think they should have put extra years on it? I know we've been going through it for the past 10 years, well, longer than 10 years, but to say in 3 years that's it.
I think it's too soon.
Yeah.
I honestly think it's too soon. I've sat in a lot of meetings over the last 6 months, consultation meetings with people about it, and I think the consensus was that by 2030 we could be there. So this is 4 years earlier, really. If end of 2030 had been the option, I think we'd have all felt that we'd have it 99% sorted. Yeah. But I think we'd have it half sorted by the end of 26. 26 is no time at all.
No, it doesn't.
You know, think about it. We just had Mother's Day come and go. We've got 2 more Mother's Days, really.
And that's
24, 25, and then year 26 will be the last Mother's Day. So there's 3. With that third one, we need to have all our houseplants in peat-free. Yeah. To be sure that it actually works, doesn't it?
It's a big change.
Yeah, and houseplants, very few are grown in peat-free. I was out in Spain last week on a buying trip, talking to nurseries out there, some fantastic growers out there, and to leave here at 5 degrees and get off a plane at 25 degrees was lovely. But honest to goodness, they are so behind on the peat-free conversation. You know, you're looking at some gorgeous plants that we all sell in garden centres in the UK because they grow them really well, but they grow them really well in peat. Yeah. And those plants won't be available. I honestly don't think that 2026 end of is going to be feasible for those guys to have great crops available. And partly they'll go, well, why do you need to? Because actually if all the rest of their markets are not yet peat-free, maybe are working to 2030, they'll say, well, actually Britain, as important as it is, it's not absolutely critical to our business. We've got lots of other places in Europe to supply. So they won't rush to sort it just for us. If the whole of Europe had worked on a date, then that would bring up its own challenges, because again, would there be enough compost to fuel the whole of Europe? But at least it would have made it critical for every grower in Europe, because their whole market would have been affected.
Do you think it could end a lot of businesses?
I think it'll put some people off carrying on. I don't see that it needs to end any business. I think there's plenty of technology out there going into the research of how to get good peat-free production. So I think if you want to embrace the change, you can do. But I do equally think there are growers out there who think, I've had enough. This is a step too far now. They don't want to face the challenge, and I think that will stop them. And of course, what will happen maybe is some of those nurseries will become part of another nursery business, but equally some of those nurseries will be turned into housing or to alternative development business units, and we'll lose that production. That will happen, and that's really sad and worrying, because we don't have enough British horticulture in production at the moment. We certainly don't want to lose any of it, but I think that's the real risk of this decision.
And I know a few nurseries that are doing trials at the moment, and they're doing different crops, but say hellebores, they're doing the same plant, but one crop in peat-free and one crop in peat, to just gauge the difference. Yeah. And obviously the ones in peat come out better at the moment. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we've got to look at different feeds, the wetting agents again.
And educating the customer, because it's easy on the nursery, isn't it? You learn that you need to feed it more often, so you feed it more often. It's what you do. You know, great growers, you work it out, you sort it, and you keep on doing it. But the minute it leaves the nursery and it gets put on a van or a lorry or a trolley to move across to a garden centre, it's no longer being fed. It sits on a garden centre, it's maybe not being fed. It goes to somebody's home, it's probably certainly not being fed certainly as much as it was on the nursery 2 weeks ago. So what can happen? Well, I certainly know if I didn't eat for 2 weeks, I would be deteriorating. And I think this is the worry, that we need to educate the customer to make sure they understand that it's not difficult but different, and that they will need to feed more often. They will need to feed and water more often. They need to be conscious that actually peat-free compost seems to dry out on the top and give a crust, but sometimes it can still be quite wet underneath. It's not all about appearances anymore, is it?
No.
So we will have to do a huge amount as an industry to teach people how to garden peat-free, how to make plants thrive in the house or in the outdoor space, and that is a big piece of work. And of course, education takes time.
It does.
So we've got to get people to experience the product and learn. And what we can't have happen is people lose heart because their plants didn't do any good, they lose their interest, they stop gardening, they go and do something else. Because that would be a disaster. But that's another unintended consequence, isn't it, of maybe this new legislation, which has got to go through government yet. It's an intention, it's not law. So there is time, hopefully, for them to realise that the law is fine, but the date is wrong.
I think also the government, if they're not educated well enough as well, they're just, let's ban it.
Yeah.
That's it, it's done for them. Where I think it would help to educate the people that are in charge of it.
Yeah. And if you look at a parallel, and this really bothers me, about I don't know anybody that says to me smoking's good for you.
Yeah.
And yet they haven't banned smoking.
Yeah.
And yet they're taking this heavy-handed approach to peat. And plants are fundamentally good for you. So we're at completely opposite ends of the scale. Smoking, bad for you. Plants, good for you. And yet there is a real risk that we're going to kill half our industry or a huge amount of our industry or the customer's ability to plant stuff through a heavy-handed legislation. Well, why didn't they ban smoking 30 years ago? Why didn't they just say, that's it? No, they've gone a different route, they've taxed it and they make more money out of it and they make more money out of it and they put the tax up every year. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, so I have no idea why people bother smoking, but the government didn't choose to ban smoking and yet they're banning something which is actually good.
Yeah.
Annoying.
It's crazy.
Annoying.
Crazy to think.
Yeah. That's what really bothers me.
On about banning as well, how do you feel about chemicals to treat plants? Do you believe biological controls need to be brought forward quicker than they are, rather than using the chemical aspect of it?
I think as a gardener, none of us really want to use chemicals, do we?
No.
And as a grower, there's a commercial challenge, isn't there? Because people are wanting a certain thing to look a certain way, and therefore they want pest-free, mark-free, they want the plant, the food, crop to look great, they want it to be as they imagine it to be, which is perfect. And chemicals have played a big part in producing a visually perfect product, but I think the industry, the world, society would rather be chemical-free. I think that is exactly the right thing. I think over the years, actually, many chemicals have gone and disappeared from the shelf or from the storage unit, and they're not used on nurseries anymore. I think what the customer has done is helped us to realise that we don't need perfect carrots. You know, a bag of perfectly imperfect carrots or wonky veg and all this stuff now, it's actually absolutely great, isn't it? And I think we know that most gardeners working at home in the back garden don't want to spray their apple trees, they don't want to spray their cabbages and things, they'd rather have an organic solution, a natural solution. And I think that's coming back, and I think the big shift in age profile of gardeners is that these younger gardeners, it will be more and more important to them. And I think it's so important now that actually cost becomes less of an issue. Historically, I think when times are tight and people have gone to the supermarket and they could buy organic veg or they could buy what's the alternative? It's called organic or not organic, isn't it? But anyway, they could buy the cheaper veg or they could buy the organic. When times are tight, people would go, they would love to buy the organic, but actually they can only afford the normal. So they would do it. I think that's changed. I think nowadays people are far more conscious of their health and actually what happens environmentally, food, provenance and things. So I think the demand is there at the commercial food production end, and I think actually in the domestic garden, we don't want to have shelves full of chemicals in our garages or sheds, do we, or in the cupboard in the kitchen anymore. So I think it's a good thing, definitely a good thing. I think as ever, it's about research, isn't it? Finding, as you say, what's the right way. Complementary companion planting, say you're planting a mixed garden of flowers and vegetables, and the flowers are generating the insect population that's dealing with the alternative insects, all that, brilliant, isn't it? And just education again, back to let's make sure we tell people how to thrive in their garden.
And for the pest control with aphids, whitefly, I believe that you could do a ladybird farm on a commercial nursery,
Yeah.
from what I've looked at a cheap cost.
Yeah.
Because you've got ladybirds all over your nursery.
Yeah.
You could collect them, have them housed
Yeah.
throughout the winter. They just breed
Yeah.
non-stop throughout the winter, and then the next season you've actually got a biological pest control
that
hasn't cost
brilliant. I
you
love the
anything.
idea of that. The Ladybird Hotel.
Yeah.
Book in for, check in for the winter, and what a place to be.
And then in the summer you can just release them into whatever tunnel or greenhouse that you need to, and let them do their business.
Yeah, let them do the work.
And then collect them again.
Yeah. No, there's lots of reasons why that is a great thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no reason why it's a bad thing. So it's a positive move, isn't it?
And wild flower gardens as well.
Yeah. Well, they're also gorgeous,
Yeah.
aren't they? I mean, there's a big plus side, isn't it? A wild flower meadow or a border. I mean, there's one. I don't know if you ever drive towards Ombersley, but when you go out the other side of Ombersley to Holt Fleet, you got that hill there on the right. The wildflower border, hedgerow, edge of road side that they've done. Oh, that's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
If it wasn't such a busy road, you'd jump out and take photographs, but it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. And they're wonderful. I was over at the nursery over near Malvern the other day, and they've done that between their glass houses. So instead of just having a mowed, grassed area or a slagged area, they've done wildflowers, and they've got them all the way down between the tunnels. It's brilliant.
It's great,
Gorgeous.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Looks good and helps with the plant.
Yeah.
Brings more bees.
Yeah.
Again,
that's fantastic.
Just go around pollinating.
Yeah.
And helping us.
Yeah. That's all good. It's all good. That's a really big plus side of our world.
How do you feel expos like Glee are important to the industry?
Oh wow. Well, they're critical. I don't think they're important. I think they're critical. I think the opportunity to go to somewhere like Glee and you have 3 days and you can see such a broad range of suppliers and you can do comparisons, you can walk backwards and forwards and look at things. I think what's really important about Glee or Solex or the National Plant Show is actually it's about having a comprehensive offer. And so the years when you go to these shows and sometimes some of the big players have decided to have a year off, that really annoys me. That's really so annoying. Because you think it's actually your customers that you're disadvantaging here.
Yeah.
Because when we walk around the show, you want to see the broadest possible range of options to make your considered decisions while you're there, or to at least be able to walk out of the show and within a few days make a decision and decide, right, I've seen the best there is, I've seen all my choices, I can now make an educated decision. And as soon as somebody doesn't go, you've not seen all the options, or you decide, well, I've now seen the options available and those people are out. So it's a crazy decision not to go to these big shows. They should all be supported. They're phenomenal. When you walk around Glee, the amount of content there is that is all appropriate to our industry is fantastic. And how else could you actually see so much in such a short period of time? So I think they're absolutely fantastic, and I love the National Plant Show. I love Four Oaks later in the year. It's very different, 2 different shows. So National Plant, all about retail ready plants really, and you walk around there and it's just 2 days of glorious plant. It's intoxicating really, isn't it? You walk in there and you must breathe in all the plants and you see all the breeders and the growers there. Then you go to Four Oaks and you see the manufacturing equipment and all the nursery side of it. Fantastic. Some of the shows in Europe are really good as well, because that gives you opportunities, whilst we still can bring things from abroad, to still offer the best of the world. I think that's important actually for a garden centre, to ensure that it's got something for everybody, and that does mean going abroad to shop from time to time. But what a world it'd be without shows. They better not ban them.
No.
I'm going to be really upset if they start banning shows.
I would myself. But it's also like Chelsea, Malvern Spring Show,
beautiful.
as well. Have you noticed when they've been on that certain plants sell quicker in the garden centre?
Well, I think it was fascinating having Chelsea the other year in September, because we're also used to the May show, aren't we? 3rd week of May every year, and there is a certain palette of plants that are available easily at that time of year. So every year you see those plants appearing on TV, on the gardens, in the press, and yes, we get that inevitable lift. But when we had Chelsea September for the 1 year, you saw a whole different range. So you saw astrantias and you saw more purples and all different colours. And I thought that show was brilliant because it was a different time of year. And again, you saw the spike. So suddenly, all those plants have been shown on TV. I mean, it's a phenomenal piece of work, isn't it? BBC's coverage of Chelsea. It's incredible the amount they put into it. And I think Chelsea is the world's finest flower show, isn't it? When you go to Chelsea, it is just brilliant. The quality of those gardens that people build, or the specialists. You look at what Taylor's Bulbs put on the Johnny Walker Daffodil display. Wow.
I haven't been myself yet.
Have you not?
No, not
you
yet.
need to get yourself there.
It's on my list.
Yeah.
It is on my list. I'll be honest, Malvern last year was my first flower show.
And that's a lovely show.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. Malvern, great. It starts the season off, doesn't it? It's really the first show of the year. The backdrop of the Malverns, well, you can't help but love that. But the floral marquee, and then there's some great plant retailers there. So you get this whole sort of spring rush from early May there, and then you're just sort of coming off that high, and then Chelsea happens, and Chelsea just fantastic. If you can get one of the garden builders to get you a pass to go and help them for a day, like the Saturday or Sunday before the show opens, that's the time to go. Because it is not crowded, and you just see the finishing touches. You just say, I'll come and graft you. I was down there 2019, we had Green Fingers Charity had a garden, and I was there on Sunday, and I spent all day on my knees scrubbing tiles. But what an opportunity to be in Chelsea the day before the press day.
I'll speak to some people.
Yeah, you need to get yourself in there. And then press day is a very special day because it's again not crowded, and you see the finished gardens. But any day at Chelsea is brilliant. The other show, we must forget about Hampton Court in the summer.
Yes.
Hampton Court, wonderful. And the big difference with Hampton Court, again, you've got a different time, so roses and things look brilliant, but it's very spacious, whereas Chelsea is incredibly small. Physically, it's a really small show, packed, absolutely packed out with people and plants, but Hampton Court, you feel like you've got a bit more space to wander around, and you've got big grassed areas to sit on, and if the weather's great, you can sit there, and it's just fantastic. So
it's amazing as well what the show puts on. Did like the size of some of the gardens and the effort that you can see has gone into building it.
And then the fact that a couple of weeks later it's all gone.
It's just
and we're back to grass. And that's the same. Tatton, Hampton Court, Chelsea, all of those things are incredible. But the other thing that people need to do, and I think we probably forget, is these shows are amazing. They are incredible showcases for a few days. But there are some there's many beautiful gardens around Britain that are there all year round. That people should visit. I mean, these riverside gardens at Wychbold, I remember when they were first planted. That was nursery space, but look at them now, aren't they stunning? And actually,
massive.
all year round, you can visit these gardens, and you go to National Trust properties. They've got great gardens. You go to the RHS gardens, the new Bridgewater garden, different again to Hyde Hall or to Wisley, or I was at Kew on Boxing Day this year. Again, different all day, and you can visit gardens at any time of year and see different things. I was over in Bressingham at the world famous Bressingham Gardens back in December. Adrian Bloom took me around the gardens for a couple of hours, and seeing a winter garden like Bressingham is absolutely stunning. But it's beautiful in the summer. The herbaceous borders in the summer are brilliant, but the winter, the grasses and the stem colours on a frosty day, and that's another thing, isn't it? You haven't got to wait for Malvern or Chelsea to come round. You can go and get a gardening fix anywhere, can't you?
It's like you say, different seasons you see the different plants.
You should go back, shouldn't you? It's the same with planting a garden. You should never ever plant a garden completely in one season. You should actually plant it across the seasons, because so often I've seen people over the years who go, I went to the garden centre, I went in the spring, I bought loads of plants, my garden looked fantastic, and now 6 weeks later, 8 weeks later, 12 weeks later, I'm a bit disappointed in it now. Well, you bought a spring garden. That's what you created. You're now in summer, you haven't got a summer garden. Why did you buy it all in one go? Why did you not buy your garden over 12 months? Buy a little bit. So go into a garden centre in January, you see great things, you see sarcococca, and you go, wow, what's the smell? Wow, I want one of those outside my back door. You go buy it. You won't ever spot that in May in a garden. So I think that whole thing about gardening through the seasons, create an all year round garden, is really important, isn't it? And easy.
That's the education part of it again.
Yeah.
Coming back
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. And get people to realise gardening isn't just for spring. Because it's a bit like a dog isn't just for Christmas, isn't it? Everybody gets excited in the spring and then they get onto other things. But actually, a little bit of garden therapy all year round. I was with a guy yesterday. He's a doctor down in Kent, and he's created a garden as part of his doctor's practice, and they're prescribing vitamin G.
Like vitamin green.
Vitamin green, vitamin garden. So vitamin green, so you go and actually you garden, and they're getting absolute results. Where people are getting better through going gardening, and currently they've got a small garden, and they've just been given a larger site down in Tunbridge in Kent. It's going to be fantastic. You think vitamin G, wow.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's horticulture therapy,
Yeah.
and they are pushing that now for mental health.
Yeah.
But again, for mental health, horticulture is the best industry to be in.
Yeah.
Right,
It's so relaxing. Yeah, it's so relaxing, and you just de-stress, don't you? And you get a bit frustrated because your plants aren't growing quick enough. But that's not stress.
No.
That's just like come on,
And
I'm hungry, I need that food.
Exactly, and like we said earlier with like the strawberries and the tomatoes, once you've grown it and you've ate it, that's what you have grown.
Yeah.
So it gives you that boost to say, I did that, I grew that and I've ate it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
But for mental health, I do believe the industry is fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of therapeutic gardens now, isn't there? Lots of projects around the country that people are working on, which gives people access to gardening that maybe don't live in a property with a garden, but they can now access them through lots of these schemes.
Yeah, and allotments as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. I mean, there's space for loads of allotments.
Yeah.
There isn't enough of them about.
No.
When I lived in a flat, we never had a garden, and it was horrible in the summer. And I wish I did get an allotment, just so I could go down and just, even if I didn't plant, but sit there.
I think there's also going to be, and I don't know how we do this, but I'm almost thinking, I'm almost in my head inventing an app right here and now about shared spaces.
Yeah.
Because there must be people who they get to a stage in their life, whatever that may be, when they can't look after the garden they've got. It might be because of work pressures, it might be because of family pressures, it might be through physical challenges or illnesses, might it? But there are other people who must live next door, or across the road, or down around the corner, who would love to have access to that garden space and keep it maintained and grow things for both the owner of the property, but also for their own benefit. And you think there must be a way of bringing that together, letting people know that, hey, I've got a garden here, I just can't cope, and somebody else going, I would love to help you with that garden. And getting that mixed thing.
I'll help you with the garden and you let me use the garden.
Yeah. It's symbiotic, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
Yeah. So I know at our over at Burford House in Tenbury Wells, where we've got the 4-acre garden there, we have a group of volunteers who actually, most of them live locally, they come and they're maintaining that garden. They've improved the garden since I took that on in 2014, 2014, that site. Yeah. And I met these volunteers on the first Sunday. And we said, you're not volunteers, you are garden angels. And that's what they are, they're our garden angels. Yeah. And they are loving restoring that historic garden. And many of them live in a house with a garden, but it's maybe a small garden that they've actually fully created and tended over the years, but they feel that they want now the bigger challenge, they want some new opportunity, they don't want to grub out all their lovely garden and start again, but this is giving them the chance to explore new opportunities, grow new things, and they love it. And it's a real community piece of work that they come together on a Sunday morning, they spend the day together gardening, they create friendships, they learn from each other. And we've got that huge garden, which we would really struggle to maintain. 4 acres of what was in effect had been abandoned for a few years as a garden. So it had not gone into derelict, but it had become neglected. Yeah. And now it's a gorgeous showpiece and something they're really proud of. So
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
It really is.
Yeah.
With the garden centre trade, how important is it to have happy staff and good customer service?
I can't imagine what it'd be like without it. Yeah. Oh, imagine it. Oh my goodness me. It's critical, isn't it? I mean, if you walk into anywhere, a shop, a restaurant, a hotel, the local car dealer to get your car serviced, if you've got old grumpy stumps sat across the counter, it's not going to be a good day, is it? No. It's just awful. And I think, why wouldn't you be happy working in a garden centre, really? If you're not happy working in a garden centre, seek your happiness elsewhere. Go and get yourself another job. Do yourself and everybody else a favour and get out, because it's not for everybody. It's garden centre work is hard work. Can be cold and wet. You know, who wants to stand outside selling Christmas trees in December when it's -3 and it's pouring down? It's not, you know, not for everybody, is it?
No,
not everybody wants to do that, but lots of people do. But I think you've got to be happy, haven't you? Why would you do any job and not be happy? It's sad, isn't it?
It really is.
So you need to be happy, and it's a happy place, isn't it? And I think a good garden centre team who can share their enthusiasm for plants with their customers and help them discover something that's right for them is just brilliant, isn't it? So
It is.
yeah, I would definitely, if you're unhappy, I think it was Walt Disney who first said, time to seek your happiness elsewhere.
What about investing in staff
Yeah.
on training courses to get the knowledge for the customer?
Yeah.
How
Really
crucial
valuable.
is that?
Really valuable. It's really valuable, and I think there's a lot of training out there, but I think what is really important is you match the training to the person.
Yeah.
It's no good saying everybody's going to do this course. Well, if that doesn't fire somebody's imagination, that's a bit school-like, isn't it? We will all do English, we will all do French, we will all do maths. Not everybody's good at English, French and maths, and it stresses people out. So the right training for the right person, and it's all about personal development, isn't it? I think
It is.
personal is a thing. There are fundamentals, aren't there? Health and safety. Things you need to just accept are part of life. That's part of going to work. You can't drive that forklift unless you've been trained. Simple as. But actually there's lots more training in personal development that allow people to flourish, and it's a different recipe for each person, isn't it?
It is.
So I think actually having a training suite available where you can say to people, look, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What's your career ambition? And let's help you on your journey. Different timelines. Some people absorb training really well and it's quick and they just click to it. Other people, they absorb it but it takes longer, and therefore you've got to sometimes tailor the training course and the length of time. But I think what we have got in our industry is a lot of people who are really, really passionate about it and are really happy to help and share. So, touched on the YPHA earlier. The YPHA, unbelievable. You know, that organisation which started just before COVID, young people in horticulture, no rules, except you've got to be under 35.
Yeah.
So I just missed the cut, but hey, that's all right. They let me come in as an ambassador. But the absolute power of that group is there is 400 people now who are in horticulture. They've got soil scientists, they've got accountants, they've got forklift drivers, they've got marketeers, they've got journalists, they've got plant producers, they've got retailers, they've got caterers. If you're in horticulture, in the widest possible sense, you can join.
Yeah.
Free to belong, but what you get back is priceless. Because that network, through COVID and lockdown, they were all doing webinars, and of course they just worked out very quickly that actually they could communicate through WhatsApp and things and support each other and share knowledge, share problems, share the solutions. And they are such a wonderful group of people who are indirectly training each other.
Yeah.
Because it's not formal training, there's no certificate at the end of that, but actually what they're doing is helping each other to develop their careers, encouraging each other, sympathising when something does, crop failure, what we've done wrong, helping each other like that, looking for a new opportunity, they're helping each other with that. And that actually is personal development at the really best, because it's friend to friend, really helping each other. And when I see them meet, we met in last year, we met for a big day out at Wisley, so it's YPHA, day out at Wisley, and quite a lot of us met the night before at a pub near Wisley, because it's driven from all over the country. And it was the most surreal experience, because I'm sat there as a crusty old man in his 50s, and all these youngsters are on their phones in the pub. Now, if you're in a normal pub, you'd think they're all looking at football or looking at some videos or something. They were all comparing photographs of their variegated leaf monsteras. And they were all showing each other, I've got 5 leaves, because they'd all been given a small plant a few months earlier, and they'd all been growing them, and they were going, I've got 5 leaves now, I've got 4 leaves. And I thought, wow, all these young people sat in a pub with some weird drinks on the table, but talking about plants. I thought, wow, hasn't the world changed?
It's fantastic,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, it really was brilliant. Made me so happy just to see them. I was like, the only thing I was unhappy about was I never got one of the plants. So I was like, well, I can't take part in this party. But no, it was good.
It's like you say as well, networking.
Yeah.
Because that's what you need to do in the industry.
Yeah. This industry, I think, shares. I've got so many friends who work in other industries, and the conferences, the trade shows, just the communication through social media and things, the ability of us to share and the willingness to share, I don't think gets replicated.
No.
I think other industries, people would say, well, you can't talk to him, he works for another company, his competitor, don't talk to him. Whereas actually there's so many wonderful people who are so happy to share their knowledge they've acquired over the years and their experiences. I really have never come across another industry like it.
I've met a lot of people in the industry, and every response I get is, if you need anything, you know where we are, this is my number, this is my email address.
Yeah.
If you want to chat about anything, need any information, and it's just
brilliant.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, it really does. And it helps everybody, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. And what goes, there's a big thing, isn't it, about pay it forward. I help you out, you don't have to do me a favour back. You do somebody else a favour, and that's paid back, isn't it? That's the pay it forward principle of life. And I think that's what we do in our industry, is somebody will help somebody, but they don't expect and wouldn't want anything back. And all they think is that if I help you, you can go forward and help somebody else in the future. And that actually is how it works. And that's the big thing, isn't it? There's no book out there where people are saying, you owe me, I did this for you. Just everybody helps everybody.
You could teach somebody something that then gets taught to another person, and it just gets handed down.
Yeah, and that's a big opportunity, isn't it?
With the YPHA, obviously you have to be 35 or under.
Yeah.
Is there anything coming for people over 35?
There is. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you saw last year, did you see on April the 1st, they had a big wind-up, the MPHA, the MAFA, middle-aged people in horticulture, and they did a brilliant video and a whole thing, didn't they, on April Fools about that. Now, actually, the joke has turned into reality. So actually, they are going to be launching this year something which is for those that are over the 35-year threshold, because there's such a value in that organisation. So actually what they're now looking at is the ability for those over 35 to mentor the people under 35, so they still keep connected up. Because there's friendships that have been made in the YPHA which are going to be lifetime friendships. So why would you suddenly take away that network and that organisation? So yes, there is a future for us old and crusties.
I look forward to hearing about
Sign it up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can't wait, if I'm honest. I know it sounds silly, I thought, do I lie about my date of birth?
But just to get in.
Yeah, just to get in.
You'd get away with it. You look like you'd just go below the line.
Oh, thank you.
They never let me in.
I don't know, they would. But as an ambassador for them, do you get the pride of teaching?
I just get there's an amazing sense of pride for what they've achieved, because they've done so much on their own. As ambassadors, I don't think we really help them enough. In truth, don't tell them that. Don't let them listen to this, will you?
I won't.
Put some sort of clever software on so they can't listen. But I think it's fantastic what they've achieved, and they are just so passionate about what they do. They now go to shows. They were at the Garden Press event in February talking to journalists about careers in horticulture. They're doing all this stuff because they believe in the future of the industry, and they want to encourage more and more people into it. So seeing what they've done, it's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful, and the team that created it, what a wonderful bunch of people. And they've just grown. I say over 400 people now. It's incredible.
It's just going to keep growing and growing.
Yeah, it's a real movement, isn't it?
It is.
They're going to be one of the biggest trade groups in our industry.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, which is, who would have thought it?
Yeah, honestly, it's fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant.
You mentioned earlier about Green Fingers.
Yeah.
Charity. So for people that don't know, what is Green Fingers?
Wow, Green Fingers. Well, it's how was someone Green Fingers? 24 years ago, an idea was born, which was that there was a need for children in hospices to have access to gardens. We all know that all forms of hospice care is horrific, and nobody would ever want to be in a situation where they had to take advantage of a hospice care. Sadly, just the way it is that the funding, when they build a new hospice or they extend a hospice, the funding is so critical to get the facilities right, and that's the facilities within the building, that there's never any money to do the outside area. So Richard Jackson, who very well known for his appearance on QVC and things, came up with this idea that actually could the industry create some gardens for children in hospices. And that was his starting point. So they thought about it, and they created a garden. They funded, planted, built, made a garden for children in hospice. When you actually then look at what's happened, So 24 years on, it's the 25th anniversary next year, the charity is still going.
Yeah.
It's still creating gardens. The gardens that they started creating might have been a 10 or 20,000 pound project in those early days. They're now a 150,000 pound project because they're so much more than a garden. They're not only beautifully visual that children in hospice can look out at, they're also spaces where they can have treatment, where their families can go and have a bit of reflection time, where the workers and staff and the carers in the hospice can now go out and actually have a bit of spare time. They get a few minutes just to themselves, just to go and have a bit of a catch their breath and just take stock of what's going on. So these gardens have become this multifunctional space, and Green Fingers continues to create them. So over 60 gardens now across the UK. Amazingly, you'd think, well, that must be it. That must be all the hospices in the UK done. It's not.
Yeah.
Sadly, there are more hospices. Also, of course, you go back 20, 15, 24 years ago, some of those gardens that were created now are needing to be reviewed and refreshed. Buildings have been extended, layouts have changed, some of the gardens have gone because buildings have consumed the space. So there is still a need to create gardens. And what I find amazing is the difference outdoor space was making to the family. And I had a real moment of experience a few years ago when I met a young lad at an event. It was about Green Fingers, he was raising money. His mum was speaking. This was down in central London, and she was talking about her daughter, this little boy's sister, who died in a hospice that had a garden that Green Fingers created. And she spoke as a grown-up very eloquently and very sensibly, and she talked about how they felt and how they'd used the garden. So after she'd spoken, we were then standing around chatting, and this little lad, who's called Billy, came up to me, and I think Billy was about 7 at the time, and he said, "Hello, mister." He was a real East End lad, he was a real cracking little lad. And he said, "Hello, mister, have you, did you build the garden my sister died in?" Oh. And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was just like stuck, this little face looking up at me. And I said, well, I was involved with the garden. I didn't build it myself, to be honest with you, Billy. But I do know about the garden. And I said, what was it like? And he looked me in the eye and he said, it was terrific. We had so much fun. And I instantly realised that actually this garden was for his sister, but it was actually to create happy memories for his family.
Yeah.
And Billy's now 18, 19 years old, and I swear he will still remember the happy garden and the happy times, those last few hours and days that he had with his sister. He won't remember the horrificness of why they were there. His memory was changed, and that's what actually Green Fingers Garden does. So Green Fingers is out there building gardens. It's a very small charity. The money they receive, huge amount of it, as much as they possibly can, goes into creating the garden. Very, very small organisational costs. It's a very small team that create it, hugely supported by the garden industry with gift in kind, people giving them materials and plants. But they do need to raise money because you've got to put parts in and structures, that costs money. And they create these gardens all over the country for hospices where they have children. And that's what they do. And we just had Garden Relief Day, which is an amazing industry day each spring when lots of things happen, planting workshops in schools and planting talks and demonstrations in garden centres, quiz nights, a walk. Loads of people yesterday, 100 people yesterday did a 20-mile walk around a beautiful part of the country down in Hertfordshire. And that's to raise money and awareness for the charity. So it's just a phenomenal charity. And when you look at what it's doing, it's providing support for children and their families and their carers in a most horrific situation, which is cancer orientated. So it's children and cancer. It's the only charity that I've ever seen in the country who can actually receive money today and spend it tomorrow and make a difference for every day afterwards. So much good money goes into good charities, but of course it's a long-term research project, whereas actually giving money to Green Fingers, you can see the benefit so quickly, the difference that space will make outside a hospice. And now Green Fingers has become such a recognised authority that they are often consulted by hospices when they're building a new building. So simple things. In the old world, windows would be at normal height. Children are in a bed, they can't see out a window and see the garden. Okay, put a window lower in the room, so the window now drops maybe almost down to the floor, so a child in a bed can see the birds pecking at the food on the floor. They can see the flowers just coming through the lawn. And so Green Fingers has been able to influence actually hospice design as well, to ensure that that outdoor space becomes part of the indoor experience.
That's
So
fantastic.
it's an amazing charity, yeah, it's really good. But it's such a sad place that they operate in, but it's such a wonderful thing they do. So actually you can't be anything but happy about what they actually achieve. And the gardens are stunning. Yeah, some of these pieces of work have just been brilliant. So yeah, it's a great charity. It means a lot to a lot of people, and the industry loves it, which is great. It's really, I think it's really been taken to heart because we can all see what good those gardens are doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
It really is. Something to be really proud of.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. There's a great team there. They do a brilliant job.
It helps the families.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
Yeah, it makes such a difference to grandma or parents or sisters and brothers. And the carers, yeah, they have a horrific job, don't they? The staff, the nurses, whatever they do within that building, to actually be able to just go outside and sometimes just sit and take a breath and just appreciate the flowers and the water and the birds and the wildlife. It's just it's a facility which we should never take for granted, isn't it?
It is. How do you see the industry growing now in the future?
I think education of both people to work in it, but also the consumer, the customer out there. I think the more people discover gardening, the more they enjoy it. It's so huge, isn't it? As a hobby, it's nobody in the world could actually get to the boundaries. You know, it's beyond infinity, really, isn't it? So I think actually educating people, introducing them to things that are new. I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see a huge amount of enthusiasm for garden. The whole impact of COVID and the lockdown and being restrained and restricted on what we could do made us realise that the space we have control over, our own boundaries, we need to make the most use of those. I think we're going to see a massive impact from COVID. Those weeks and weeks and weeks when we used to all sit out on was it a Wednesday or a Thursday, and you'd clap for the NHS, but also people sat at the end of their little space and they talked to the neighbour across the road. I think that whole front garden piece is now, it's community, social space, isn't it? Now, so much more the front of your door is now actually where you meet lots of acquaintances and you'll chat, lean on the gatepost and have a natter with people. And I think then the back garden becomes your private space. That becomes a space where you're going to enjoy that socialising with your close network, your family and your close friends. But all these different things will give people different reasons to get into gardening, to different causes and different things to do, creating different spaces. So having a little seat outside the front of the house now, it's something which I think my grandparents used to do. They used to sit out front of the house, didn't they? Yeah. And wave at the neighbours and have a chat. And I suppose, I never thought about it, but it just crossed my mind that I suppose in those days, there wasn't a telly, and there certainly wasn't 500 channels on telly, was there? No. To consume your time now. So you make a cup of tea and you go and sit outside, wouldn't you? And I think maybe we're going to return to that whole piece, but for a slightly different reason, because there is still 500 channels to watch it on the telly, but actually that's just too much. So we're going to just go back outside and cup of tea, chat, get to know the neighbour a bit better. So I think that's a big opportunity for the garden space. I think what we are really good at as an industry is we've always adapted. So if you look at garden centres 20 years ago, if you look, I came to work at Webb's in 1991 full time and was here for 20 years. Yeah. And you look at the evolution of the business, it's constantly changing. It's always looking to be better. It's always looking to reflect what the customer wants. And I think that's what we're really good at as an industry, is making sure that we are at the front of change. And obviously sometimes we're delivering the change, sometimes we're following the change, but we're conscious that we have to change. Plants change all through the year, shop floor space changes. I think that's what we are really good at. So I'm really positive that our industry is really strong, it's really robust. We need more people to join it for career choice because it's a great career. The customers are out there, we've got the product.
What's your advice for people that want to get into the industry, whether they're young, leaving school, or whether they're mid-30s?
Experience it, I think, isn't it? I think it's one thing to look at it until you've actually had a little go at it. You don't quite know. There's fundamentally so many different aspects to the industry that actually you might go and start working on a garden centre and then realise you want to become a grower. You might start growing and realise you want to be a retailer. Yeah. As a grower, you speak to quite a small group of people and share your passion with a smaller audience. As a garden centre plantsman, you share your enthusiasm with hundreds of people a week, thousands of people a year. So it depends on your personality. No two people are the same. So I think it's just experience it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like you said, there is so much knowledge out there and such enthusiasm to share. There's never a stupid question.
Yeah.
So always ask questions. Take advantage of that opportunity to learn from people and find your way. And if you chop and change a bit on the way, there's nothing wrong with that.
You just got to find where you fit.
Yeah, just what ticks your boxes.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And until you've tried it, I mean, that's the thing. Don't sit on the sidelines watching it, jump in and have a go at it.
Yeah.
And I think there's great employers out there all over the country. So wherever you want to be, horticulture exists. It's not that it's specific to a part of the country, so you can take your career anywhere. You can travel the world. You know, I've been to some fantastic places as a part of my job around the world, Europe, Australia, America. Fantastic. You can take that skill and be welcomed anywhere.
Yeah, and it's like you said, ask questions, because without
Always.
asking questions, you'll never
And
learn.
everybody in the industry loves to share.
Yeah.
So you ask somebody a question, you're going to get a lot more answers than you actually asked for.
And how about you? What's your future?
Gosh.
Where are you going? Obviously with British Garden Centres and
Yeah. Well, I've got a nice new big garden to sort out. So that's a personal future. There's lots of gardening, which is great. British Garden Centres is a fascinating business. It's the largest family-owned garden centre group in Britain. So it's fantastic to see, because the original founders of the business still hugely active, but then their children are now coming into the business. So you can see a long history of the business, but you can see a long future as well for the business, and that's really important actually. I think the family-run, family-owned aspect of the business gives it a completely different point of vision, so that they don't have to make decisions for quick returns. They can make decisions today knowing that it might be financially a slow return, but actually it's the right decision for the business, and so that is a different freedom that brings. The Ornamental Horticultural Round Table Group that I chair is going through a very fascinating stage of life, really, because we have got this situation now where horticulture is so recognised as a big part of the British future, the world future. So actually our role at OHRG is to talk to government and all those that make decisions that will change the world, to make sure they remember how important horticulture is, about how it can play a part to deliver the solution. So we've got a lot of chat to do, a lot of deep, serious conversations, and they're very welcoming. And that's across all parties. That's what's lovely about this situation. It's not part of the Conservative manifesto, but not with Labour. Labour, Conservatives, of course the Green Party, the Lib Dems, all these different parties, the Scottish parties, they, the guys over in Wales, they all want horticulture to be part of the future. So actually that is a huge and interesting activity at the moment. So I'm enjoying being part of all that and making what little bit of difference I can on that. So lots going on, and I think what we don't know is what 3 years from now will look like, but we do know that it will look great. I'm not sure what colour of great it will be in terms of our gardens and our space and what our hobbies and interests will be. We'll be gardening, but what we'll be doing with that garden, who knows? We can only be the best we can today and make sure we're even better tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Been a pleasure to talk to you.
No, it's been fantastic, honestly.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to get hold of you, where can they get hold of you? Or?
Yeah, well, I'm very easily found on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I think on Facebook and things, people get it's on there, and they can get hold of me through those two social media platforms, or they can simply email me. And I'm sure on your podcast you can put my email address up. But
Definitely.
It's really easy. It's bdd@britishgardencentres.com. But always welcome talking to anybody in the industry. It's the thing I love to talk about.
Thank you, and I hope we can do it again as well.
Yeah, pleasure.
It's been brilliant.
Make sure you get yourself to Chelsea.
I will do, I promise.
Yeah.
Thank you.